Hey everyone, back again with another episode of the weekly SEO. And today I'm here with Nikki Halliwell. Hey Nikki, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. I'm good to be here. How are you?
Thank you very much. I guess the video has some interruptions. Did you see that?
No.
Also? No? Okay. Maybe it's because of my connection all the time, technical issues, That's okay. So, Nikki, I want to introduce you a little bit, but I will give you this part to you to speak more detail about you. So, Nikki is technical SEO manager at Rise7. It's one of the top agencies in the UK. They do PR, they do SEO also. So, Nikki, tell us something we don't know about you and why you're here.
Yeah, as you said, I'm senior tech SEO manager at Rise7. Yeah, it's a very exciting, very fast-paced agency, but it's gone really well, and we've got some exciting things in the pipeline. So watch this space to see what happens next. What don't you know about me? You've already mentioned my dog on the little intro video there. I'm very biased, but he's very cute. 2-year-old pug named Spud. And yeah, I also play football for the local women's team.
Cool. By the way, this presentation will be a little bit technical, but don't worry, Nikki is here to handle it. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'll get started.
Yeah.
So, first of all, as we said, we're going to be talking about technical SEO, but specifically technical SEO audits and how you can ensure that your audits cover the basics and allow you to identify any problem areas of your website. A little bit about me again, some of which we've already mentioned. So experienced in e-commerce, that's where a lot of my background is. I'm based in Manchester in the UK. Funny football fans, yes, I am a Manchester United fan. I just won't talk about this season that's not going particularly well. But yeah, as well as working at the amazing Rise7, I also offer freelance SEO services as well. And you can check out my website there, and you'll see a link to my Twitter. Hopefully we will have time for questions at the end, but if for any reason we don't have any questions, feel free to drop me a message on Twitter and I'll get back to you there. There's another picture of Spud. It was very hard not to just fill this presentation with photos of my dog, but this is a technical SEO presentation, not a pug presentation. So here we go. 7 steps is what I'll be covering today of how to conduct a technical SEO audit. At the end of the day, there's no right or wrong way for an audit to look. There's lots of other people that talk about their audits, and they're completely right as well. I just find that these are 7 basic steps that are really useful to take. And as I said earlier, it just allows you to cover the basics and make sure that you've got a really in-depth look at your website. And, it's one that hopefully your competitors will envy as well. And it allows you to, once you've done all these 7 steps, it allows you to start to put those into action and start seeing really good return on investment and start hitting those all-important KPIs. So the first step is gathering basic technical information. Now, this is a manual process, but we will talk through some of the steps here. And we do this because it allows us to really understand the website that you're working on, the website that you're auditing. So when you're doing this, the first step that anyone should do is manually review the website. So act like a user is what I've included on the screen there. And what that means is you need to click through the website as if you were the user trying to complete the primary goals of the website. And as you're doing that, look to see how the website behaved. Does it behave as you would expect? Are there any barriers to conversions or completing any other business goals? And it's really useful if you're able to note down anything that draws your attention in any way, whether it's something that you find unusual or also things that you think are being done well. It's good to note those down as well, because you can come back to them later on, and those can help to guide any of the future decisions that you make. So once you've done that, we can start to use our crawling tools. I'd suggest running through any of these tools. These are just a selection of some of them on screen. Each have their unique selling points, and I would always recommend using more than one as well. For example, I'm running an audit at the moment, and it's in its very early days. I've still got quite a bit of work to do on it, but so far on that, I've used Screaming Frog, Sitebulb, Ahrefs, and SEMrush. So that's just 4 tools so far. I might end up using a couple of other tools as well, depending on what I find as I progress through the audit. But 9 times out of 10, it's those 4 tools that I start with. If it's a really large site, like a massive e-commerce site, then I might use something more like OnCrawl or DeepCrawl, which tends to be a little bit more capable than the likes of Screaming Frog to handle those massive sites. And that's tend to be one that's got like tens of thousands of pages. But anything below that, you know, Screaming Frog works really, really well. And I use Sitebulb alongside that just because it gives a variety of different insights. So that's it. So that's the gathering information phase. So that's step 1 done. Step 2 is gathering data about the website. So we've seen, you know, kind of how it works, but now we'll see how it actually performs. And the first thing we can do is look at Google Search Console. Hopefully this is something that we're all familiar with, but there's 3 areas that we can look at here, 3 core areas that I'd always look at. And, you know, this will really give an overview of how the website's performing. So first of all, we'll look at the performance report. And here we can see things like the clicks, impressions, average position, and the average click-through rate. So I'll usually set the date range to the last 12 months, and I'll download that data. And then I'll go to the coverage report, and within this section here, we'll be able to see pages that are indexed and that do appear in Google Search. And we can also see if there are any pages that are excluded from Google Search and why that may be. And then finally, I'll have a look in the page experience report, which displays whether or not the site is meeting Google's page experience signals. That's, of course, in relation to Core Web Vitals and the mobile usability reports. So I'll always make sure to look at those 3 core areas, set the date range to at least 12 months, spend some time analysing that, make sure you download a copy of that data. From there, I'll go into Google Analytics. From here, I'll usually go to the audience overview section, and again, set the date range to the same 12 months that we just used, that we just looked at in Search Console, and download the data from that. From there, I'll also look at other areas on Google Analytics, and that's usually I'll go to like acquisition, traffic, and channels, using the same date range, and again, downloading that. So we've got a lot of data here, which is all really good. But we also then need to spend some time analysing it and looking for any trends or anything else. And the final area that we'll go to in terms of gathering data is go back to those crawling tools that we mentioned earlier. So for the screenshot that I've got here is from SEMrush. This is from their site audit function, and you can use this and the general overview section of SEMrush to gather information such as the authority score, organic traffic, traffic trends as well. We can look at the keywords, any SERP features that the website holds, as well as things like the top organic keywords and the organic position distribution. And then you can also look at Ahrefs again. So from this, we want to be gathering information such as the URL rating, domain rating, again, keywords, because it will show different keywords to what you might see in SEMrush, and there might also be some differences in the ranking data there. So it's always good to get it from multiple sources so that you can compare and contrast them. You can find the top pages and the organic positions in those as well. So again, we've got even more data here. We've got like data coming out of our ears. So what we need to do again is just take the time to analyze it, but we can also look against the competition at all of this and see if there are any ideas against the you know, and anywhere that we can improve, anywhere that the competitors are doing better than us, and then that's where we can focus our attention. Excuse me. So, step 3 of our little 7-step audit process. Third one is backlinks. So this is where we look at the backlink profile and see what websites are linking back to ours and if there's any additional action that needs to be taken there.
Yeah, today, by the way, I had a case where where a website just migrated their pages from A to B, and a lot of backlinks which they had, almost all of them are 404. When you click to the backlink, 404. That's the worst thing when it's coming to internal links and backlink profile.
Yeah,
that's definitely one hot topic.
Yeah, and just like, redirecting those pages, excuse me, can be a really good opportunity to see an increase in performance. Things like that are just a nice quick win and can produce some really good results. Excuse me. Moving forward, looking at the backlinks, as I said, so we're going to stick with Ahrefs for this. You can use Majestic and other tools as well. My personal preference tends to be Ahrefs. Using this, you can find the number of backlinks that are linking back to your website, and you can export that for future analysis again. With backlinks, more isn't always better. It's a lot more about quality over quantity, and having a large range of backlinks that have various different authority. This is something that I've been working on with one of my clients, actually. So I was doing like an opportunity analysis. So comparing that website with their competitors and seeing where the gaps in backlinks were. And it showed that in terms of increasing the authority of our website, we didn't need to go for the top DA sites. So we didn't need to be looking at websites with like 80 plus domain authority, because we already had lots of them, and we were doing better than the competitors for that. But where we had a gap was in like the 40 to 50 DA range. So that's where we've focused our attention, and we're starting to see some good results already on the back of that, especially with the PR efforts. Once we've looked at the backlinks, we'll then look at the domains themselves. You can do this by staying in Ahrefs and find the number of different domains that provide backlinks to the website. So as before, we want to export these so that we can come back to them again later. One of the things I like to do with the backlinks and the domains here is to look at the ratio. So you want to look at how many domains there are compared to the overall number of backlinks. This is because if it's too high, that could be a sign of spam, and you might want to look at disavowing them potentially. So, for example, if you have an average of 20 backlinks per domain, then that could be something that's unusual and you would want to investigate further. Step 4. So this is when we get into more of the meat of the audit, and here we're going to be looking at how the websites themselves behave. And that's through looking at the likes of indexing, crawling, and rendering. So first of all, we're going to look at how many pages are indexed. Now, this is an important one because, contrary to popular belief, the site search operator, so if you perform a check like what you can see on the screen here, so just the site, colon, and then your domain, the number that shows there, so on this example, the 129,000, that's not necessarily showing the URLs that are in Google's index. And that's an important distinction. And John Mueller has talked about this on several occasions. What it actually shows is the number of pages that Google is aware of. So there could be pages here that they've crawled, but they're not yet indexed, or pages that redirect, so they're no longer live, but Google hasn't yet removed them from the index. So don't get caught up with paying too much attention to what this metric here shows. It is useful, and I do use it because I compare this to other areas, but always keep in mind that the only definitive way to see how many pages are indexed in Google is to use Google Search Console, and you can do that within the coverage report. So that's what we looked at earlier. So when we were gathering the data from Search Console, you can compare the number of valid pages within that to this number that you have when performing this search, and seeing what the difference is. You want to have URLs really that have a 200 status code. And if there's a big difference between all of this, then that could indicate like a discrepancy and something that Google's having issues with. And again, that's something that you can work on with your developers and look to resolve. The robots.txt file is next. This is important because blocking access from certain pages is actually essential for both privacy and the security of your website. You don't need to allow everything, and you shouldn't allow everything either. So some common pages that do make sense to disallow include things like any duplicate pages. You can have thank you pages, like when you complete a checkout form, those sorts of thank you pages. But also any checkout pages and customer accounts should be disallowed as well. So when you're looking at this file, you want to be looking at all of the rules that are included. Do they make sense? And also check to see that the robots.txt file does include a link to the XML sitemap. You can access that file through Search Console, but it is always best practice to make sure that it's always included in this file as well. There shouldn't be any rules that are blocking areas to anything that's valuable on the website. So anything that's going to be providing genuine value to your audience. Another important consideration with this file is that it should always sit at the root of the domain and not within a subfolder. So it should just be domain.com/robots.txt. Excuse me.
It's okay.
So I had some chili before lunch and it's starting to fight back.
Oh yeah. I totally understand you.
It's typical. Okay, so what was I? Yes, making sure that this sits at the root domain. If it's not at the root and if it's inside a folder, that's going to affect the rules that can be applied. So even if it's inside like an index folder, which I've seen before, Google's only going to look to apply the rules that are within this file to URLs that are within that index folder, which might not actually exist on the website itself. So it's always important to make sure that it is on the domain so that you can make sure that all the rules are applied exactly as you would want them to be. Next, we're going to look at how the website uses robots meta tags. So these tell search engines whether or not you do want that page to be indexed or not. Similarly to what we just looked at with the robots.txt file, you want to look to see if there are any resources that should be blocked. And again, similar to what we've just discussed, these are things like account pages, thank you pages, and also internal search results. Doing this stops any duplication, as well as actually ensuring that no confidential customer information can appear in SERPs. I've actually seen it before where like the checkout pages have been indexable, and when people have been searching for like, I don't know, Amazon checkout, it didn't happen with Amazon, I'm just using that as an example, but you search for Amazon checkout, you can actually see customers' card details in there, which obviously is a massive issue for confidentiality and security. And you definitely don't want that to be happening with your website, because you're going to be getting in a lot of trouble if that is the case. So yeah, always make sure that those are no indexed. And remember that there is a really important difference between the robots.txt file that we just mentioned and these robots meta tags. The difference is that even if you disallow access from the robots.txt file, it can actually still be indexed. And that's because if it has internal links to that page for malware on your site, that means Google can find it that way. Or even if it has links from other websites linking to that page, you know, that's got to mean that page is still indexed. So it's always recommended, if you really don't want that information in Google search, to use both a disallow in the robots.txt and to use the robots meta tags as well. Rendering. So this is it can be a fun one. It can also be a complex one, especially if your website is built in JavaScript, which is a whole other talk in itself. But ultimately, understanding how search engines view a website can help you identify why a certain page might not be performing as well as expected. You can use the mobile-friendly test here, and that will render the page and show you the resulting HTML. So that will show you how Google understands the page and whether or not it looks good on mobile devices. Google uses the mobile-first index, as we know, so that's really important to make sure that it does look as you would like it to do so. You can also use Screaming Frog and set that up to render JavaScript. And you can do that by going to the configuration, spider, and then rendering option within the menu. You need to do that before starting your crawl, and then choose JavaScript as the choose JavaScript and then Googlebot Mobile within the configuration so that Screaming Frog is able to render the JavaScript as well. If the website doesn't appear as you would expect, either within Screaming Frog or within the mobile-friendly tool, then you can assume that there's a rendering issue, and that's something that you'd have to work quite closely with your developers to figure that out. Next, we have the XML sitemap file. So this is a file that should contain all of the URLs that are indexable on your website and have a 200 status code. Anything that's a 404 or a redirect or anything other than a 200 should not be included in that file. If it is included, that's sending conflicting signals to search engines, and then you'll likely see that flagged within the coverage report in Google Search Console, because Google is confused because you're telling it to index it, but then it's redirected, so you don't want that URL indexed. They're kind of like, well, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, it's something like internal link. You disallow the link, but it's also included in sitemap. So yeah, exactly. You can look at the sitemap as well within Screaming Frog. That's another quite useful feature. So you can see within that if there are any non-indexable pages, and to do that you need to go to Overview, Sitemap, and then non-indexable URLs in the sitemap once you've completed your crawl. However, to do that, it's important to note that when you're setting up the crawl in the first place, you need to have selected the crawl linked XML sitemap option under the configuration menu. Otherwise, you won't be able to look at that within the overview sitemap section, because it won't have crawled it unless you told it to. Similar to what we discussed with the robots.txt file, the sitemap XML also does need to be at the root of the domain. Otherwise, Google will think, again, just that, if it's inside a folder, you only want URLs within that folder to be indexed, which isn't the case, right? We want all of the indexable pages on the website to be indexed. So always make sure that it's just domain.com/sitemap.xml. Yeah. And just to give my 5 cents here, if you want to see errors in the sitemap by not just using manually or analyzing manually, you just include a sitemap on Google Search Console, sitemap section. So you will see how Google crawling your sitemap if there is any coverage issues.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. The next one is site speed. And again, I could do a whole other talk on site speed itself, but in terms of checking it during an audit, there's a few ways you can do this. My personal favorite is GTmetrix. I do use PageSpeed Insights as well, but I really do like GTmetrix just because it's useful for seeing a lot more actionable tips and identifying specific problems. Also, if you're new to discovering issues with site speed, or it's something that you want to learn more about, GTmetrix is a really good tool for that, because it'll tell you what the issues are, and then it has a link to a page on their website where you can learn more about what that actually means and how to fix it. So it's really good for understanding what it is, and you can also share that URL with your developers, and that might help you to get the issues fixed a lot quicker as well. You can also use web page test. That's another one that I use, and that's great for getting a lot more minute details about your page and any issues that you may have, as well as being able to test on various mobile devices, different sizes, as well as checking from multiple locations. If I'm going to check a website from here in Manchester in the UK, I might get different results depending on where that website is hosted, rather than where Roman might see the results in Moldova. So these are just important considerations that you need to make. Always test from where your target audience is, even if it's, I'm testing in the UK, but my audience is US. Make sure that you change the location on web page test, and also test from a few locations in the US as well, so you can see your website more like how they would experience it. Is it loading as fast as you think? Couple more points. We have internal linking. So with this one, internal links I find are a lot more powerful than most people tend to realize, and doing it well can in some cases make or break a website. So The utilization of internal linking. This is actually an image that I created quite a few years ago, and I probably should update, but it illustrates just some of the ways that link equity, or link juice, as it used to be known, can flow through a website, and it shows why you need good internal links. By providing search engines with links that have a good descriptive anchor text, so not click here, you don't always just want your brand as well. Not every internal link that we have on the Rise at 7 website is Rise at 7. We also do technical SEO, we also do PR, we do content. So we use this descriptive anchor text to help Google understand that this is a link to the technical SEO page by using technical SEO or, some variances on that keyword that link to that landing page, so Google understands this is about technical SEO. This link over here is about PR. You don't just want to be talking about Rise at 7, or just who you are and what you do. Same with my personal website. I do migration services. I do a lot of audits, as I've mentioned. So therefore, the anchor text that I'm using and the descriptive text is variances on all of those services, and it'll be the same whether you have an e-commerce website as well. Use the categories and the product names where it makes sense to do so. There are a few different methods of internal linking as well. It's not just linking from page to page. You can also use breadcrumbs, and these are a really effective way to improve the relationship between these pages. They also make navigation easier, as well as encouraging users to visit more pages on the website. So when you're doing an audit, you should always make time to check to see if the internal linking makes sense or if there are any improvements that you can make. So you want to be able to make it clear to search engines which are the most valuable pages on the website, and is there actually internal links to those pages. It's the same with backlinks as well. So you might have a lot of backlinks to the homepage, right? That's common, and you can't always control where these backlinks are going. But do we have internal linking from that homepage, or what other page has the links from that to the main money pages? Because that's how we can get the equity to flow through the website how we might like as well. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Canonical links is another one. So all pages on a website should have a canonical link element. Self-referencing canonicals I find for most, and that's where the canonical is pointing back to itself. And these are a really effective way to indicate to search engines what the main page is about, what page you would want to rank for that specific keyword. This is especially true if you have a lot of pages on a certain topic, which does commonly happen. And there's, again, a few ways you can check for that, especially in Screaming Frog. You can go to the Overview, Canonicals, and then Missing section, and that will show all of them there. So during that section, you want to be checking to see if they're all sensible. Do they all make sense? They don't have to all be self-referencing, but if there's any that are not self-referencing, is it sensible that it's pointing to another page instead of itself, or is it unintentionally no indexing that page?
Just to have some fun about canonical tag. What's your thoughts when it comes to canonicalizing pagination pages to the first page?
Pagination's always fun, isn't it? Especially with canonicals. I've seen it work both ways, to be honest, and it depends on the website. And again, like John Mueller has spoken about this. It does work, but it also depends. Pagination isn't really used anymore. It is used, but it isn't supported or recognized anymore by the likes of Google. So you can do it. Personally, I don't on my website. That's because of the way internal links flow. If you're paginating everything back, you've got the risk that you could often, or well, not often, but more alienate some of your pages. But it just depends. If it's like really typical SEO, right? It depends. It depends if a lot of it's like old content that you're not that bothered about anymore, then maybe. But just make sure that there's internal links to it, whether that's through breadcrumbs or other ways. But I've seen it work well when you paginate to page one, but I've also seen it work quite poorly. But just test it, especially with like a smaller site, it might be quite good. You can use like SEOtesting.com. That's a useful tool as well. So you can run various tests to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, well, I tested it last year.
What did you find?
Well, then I had a lot of troubles coming from a SEO industry. I won't speak up about this right now.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe we can discuss it afterwards. And I'd love to know what you found on the back of that.
Definitely.
Structured data. So search engines use structured data because it enables them to understand better. Ultimately, HTML is for users. Search engines, browsers render that HTML to make a website look how we want. But it's a structured data that is ultimately the language that bots understand. And by using it, we're helping those bots understand our content, but we're also able to use more useful features, search features and enhancements that are typically known as rich results. When you're using structured data, you can test that it's valid in a few different ways. You can use the Google structured data testing tool, or you can also use the rich results test to see what's eligible before you push that to your live site, or before you add it to your site in the first place. You can make sure that it's valid within that, which is a really useful tool. And I find that by not using structured data, you could be missing out on additional opportunities to engage your audience and also to take up more valuable real estate in SERPs. You can have like a nice big card that shows up, and that's going to push your competitors further down the page, which is just great for us. We want to be front of you when people are searching our target keywords. Redirects and status codes. So there's a lot of status codes, right? And we're not going to have time to talk about all of them today, but what I will talk about is some of the main ones that you should be talking about and looking at as a minimum as part of your audit. Server errors are one of them. Really, any of those with a 5xx status code is what's classed as a server error. The 500 is probably one of the most common, and that's indicating an internal server error. So there's a problem with the server that the website is on. It could be temporary, or it could be not temporary. It could be much more long term. In which case you've got a big problem, and you need to look at that. Hopefully, though, most server errors are temporary. The next most common type of 5xx status code that I find is the 503, and that's an indication that the website is temporarily down for maintenance. And that message tells both users and search engines that they should come back at a later date. So that's quite a useful one. Your ranking shouldn't be affected if you have a 503, because it basically just tells Google to come back later. Unless it's there for an extended period of time, then Google's just going to realize that, perhaps there's another website that they can serve in your place for a while. And then you might struggle to get that position back. So don't have your website down for maintenance for too long, or also too often. That's another consideration. So with these, if you have a large number of 500s, then, as I said earlier, with the server error, perhaps that's a sign that there's some problems. It could be that the servers are overloaded. If there's like too much traffic coming to the site, that your server just can't cope. Or it could be that it just needs some additional configuration. But either way, you can work with your developers to resolve that. The next one is the 404s that I'm sure we've all come across. Now, there's a few important considerations here that I always find when I'm auditing. Remember that it is natural. That it is natural for a website to have some 404s. It's also important that your website can generate a 404. So you can try this as part of your manual check. So try navigating to a nonsense URL. So I do this a few ways. I go to a website and I just type in like / my name. Is one. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to have a URL with Nikki on there, but you can also just type in like random characters. Both of those pages should return a 404 error. So these types of not found errors are a natural part of the website. We actually do want a certain amount of them, because they tell users that the page they're looking for is not there, it's not available. And the problem with if you can't serve a 404, so if I type in lots of random characters and that's redirected to the homepage, that causes issues, because it's a poor user experience, because users are like, why am I back at the homepage? I should be on another one. But it's also a problem because Google could think that your homepage is actually a soft 404 because it knows that that URL doesn't exist, but you're sending it to the homepage, and the last page you want Google to think is a soft 404 is your homepage. So make sure that you can have a 404 on your website, on the website you're auditing, especially if those pages are genuinely unavailable. But equally, if you have a large number of 404s, then that could be a problem as well, especially if these are on valuable high traffic areas of your website. So you should be able to generate them, but you don't want a large volume of them. So look out for both of those things as part of your audit. Redirect chains. So Google will not follow any more than 5 redirects in a chain. Any URLs at 0.5 in the chain or even beyond that could be undiscovered, and obviously that's a problem. Ideally, a URL should only be redirected once, and any chain should be reduced as much as possible. So in this example on screen, you would want A to go to C and B to go to C. So bypass that. So you're not having the chain, but you've got 3 redirects. 2 redirects happening there instead of the one. Always take the time to update these, as well as updating the internal links. So in this example again on screen, if all of your internal links are still pointing to URL A, Google's still having to follow that chain, even if you want to have A, B, and C. And that's a waste of crawl budget. The only URL that you want indexed really is C. So update the internal links to point straight to C in this case.
It also hurts page speed, because when you have redirect chain, to reach the final one from A to, I don't know, to Z, it takes at least 5 seconds. So yeah, you should avoid this one.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. Redirect with incorrect statuses. Incorrect can slightly be interpreted in various ways, but ultimately it's about knowing the difference between 301s and 302s and when you should use them. I'm not saying don't use 302s because they definitely have their place, but 301s are usually preferred. And that's because 302s are temporary. So you're telling Google that the change is temporary, or it's going to come back. Or it can also happen if you're trying to access a page that you have to log in to see. So if I'm trying to access it, the website knows I'm not logged in, so 302 redirects me to the login page, and that's because that page exists and we still want it indexed because it's valuable for whatever reason, or perhaps it's like a paywalled content on like a news website. A lot of those are paywalled these days, but they still want the content indexed. But they'll 301 redirect you to 302, should I say, redirect you to like a login page or like to a payment page. So it's just knowing the distinction between those. And I think like a useful way to understand the distinction between the two is think about it of like a change of address when you move house. So think of it as, is this your new permanent address that you want all of your mail and all of your letters to come to? So that's a 301, that's permanent. But if it's somewhere that you're just moving to for a while, and you're going to come back, perhaps you're on holiday or something, or you're just staying with a friend for a while for whatever reason, but you're going to come back home, that's a temporary change. So that would be a 302. You don't permanently want all your mail to go to that new address because you're not going to be there for forever. You're going to come back. But that can be a useful way sometimes to think about it.
Cool explanation. And speaking of 3xx status codes, what do you think about 304? For example, in that case, if there is 1,000 stock out products, and if you want to make them 304, is that a thing that could be an optimization for crawl budget? What do you think? Just your thoughts. It's not right or a false thing.
Yeah. Again, I don't want to be a typical SEO, but I was going to say it depends. There's so many different status codes, because you could even talk about like 307s as well, which is more. Again, it's another type of temporary redirect. I would ask why you're using a 304 first of all.
Yeah. Well, 304 status code is not modified code.
Yeah.
If they didn't change, I don't know if it's still not modified. And if the product is stock out and will never come back, then why not use not modified? Just a logic. It's not something we should do. Like you said, it depends. Like John Mueller says all the time. But just what you think. Is that a good idea, or, well, might be a bad idea?
It's not one that I've seen used on many occasions. So you could try it and see what difference it makes. But I personally don't use it, certainly not that often. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. It also doesn't mean that you should. But you can test it. Just see what results you see on the back of it.
Yeah,
it can be useful to have that not modified. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, test and see, guys. I just say that.
Yeah, test and see. That's what SEO is test, learn, repeat. So this is the last area. So this is step 7, the last area that you can look at as part of your audit, and this covers more of the on-page elements. The first of which is titles. All pages should have a title tag, and they should all be unique. It's best practice, and you can see this within the Screaming Frog screenshot that I have there, to keep all page titles within 30 to 60 characters as like a general rule. There is a bit of wiggle room on that, and some tools recommend other amounts of characters, but I find that this is like a good middle ground, and it stops the risk of your pages being truncated in search, so being cut off on Google search. Missing and duplicate page titles can be a quick opportunity as well, just to get those added in or to get them updated to make sure they're unique, and you should start to see some good improvements on the back of that, depending on the scale of the issue. Next one is meta descriptions. So these don't influence rankings in the same way that page titles do, but they do influence clicks. So where a description is missing, it's important to know that Google can generate its own, which isn't always going to be the most relevant for your website. However, they may actually still rewrite the description even when you do have a unique description of your own. We can't really do anything to stop that, but it's still best practice really to keep a unique description in there to increase your chances of being seen and increase the chances as well of Google using your relevant unique description. And on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about some of the other options that Google might use instead of your actually specified description. But again, similar to what we saw on the previous screen, there was a recommended length for these meta descriptions between 70 and 155 characters usually, and that allows you again to make the best use of the available space without being cut off as well. So the next one is headings. It's not all about the H1, but you definitely need a single unique H1 on the page. That is the most valuable. It's the one that Google uses to help understand the content that is on that page. So make sure that the H1 in particular does contain the target keyword. And that's important because without it, you could be missing a significant opportunity to provide Google and other search engines with this valuable information. And we need the H1 and all other headings on the page to be descriptive and to be relevant, because it's actually the headings and also areas such as even image alt text we've seen used. These could be used sometimes instead of your meta description, which, if it's not optimized, that could be a problem and it could affect your clicks. So as well as providing useful information, you're helping your website in a few other ways, actually, by making sure that you have optimized relevant information in your headings and other areas throughout your content. And that's it. So that's the 7 steps that you should be looking at as a minimum throughout your audit. Once you've got all this, make sure, as I've said several times, to actually take the time and analyze everything together and just look at the big picture and discover what it is that your competitors are doing, and finding where your website or the website that you're auditing is below average, And that's where you're going to start to see those results nice and quickly. And there we go. Hope you've found that useful.
Impressive. Thank you very much, Nikki. Yeah, we have a newsletter, by the way, guys. If you want to subscribe, you just follow this link and there is a form. You just enter your name and email, and that's it. So we send it bi-weekly. You can have dozens of resources. Dozens means like 4 or 5 resources. It's something like what Nikki do on Twitter. So just to remind, Nikki, what's your website and, I don't know, LinkedIn, how people can reach you?
Yeah, thank you. My Twitter is on the screen. You can see it at the bottom there. It's just at Nikki R. Halliwell. My website is nikkihalliwell.com. Do check that out. Any questions, let me know. Check out Rise at 7 as well. That's riseat7.com. Got a great website there that hopefully you'll find useful. And yeah, as Roman said, every Tuesday I do like a tech SEO tips on there. So every Tuesday there'll be a new useful tip. And definitely subscribe to this newsletter. The Booster Hour newsletter is really, really good with all the weekly SEO tips in there. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, thank you very much. And to the final slide, we have the last one, which I will thank you again. It was great to have you in the weekly SEO. And Nikki, you're out of this world. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Happy weekend, everyone.
Thanks, guys.